There's no happy ending here. The life of Gia Carangi is nothing if not depressing. Here we have a model, thought by some to be the first supermodel, who had the entire world in her grasp only to see it fall away in 2 years. It's the story of someone who stood at the top of the mountain so early in life that there was nowhere to go but down. It's a tragedy that only bears warnings. She was born in January of 1960 and died in November of 1986, just 26 years old and a couple months shy of the 27 club. It wasn't obvious that she would become a model. Her father owned a restaurant in Philadelphia and her mother was a homemaker. Home life wasn't happy. Her parents were fighting constantly, and the longer they stayed together, the more her father, Joe, turned violent, though according to Kathleen, her mother, he never hit the children, preferring that they enjoyed their lives. They couldn't. When Kathleen left, Gia was devastated. She was, by all accounts, her mother's daughter. When reading Stephen Fried's book of Gia, Thing of Beauty, you get the sense that no one in the family is fond of each other. Kathleen felt that Joe had turned their children against her. The boys described her as running off with another man. Kathleen then described them as not being quite accurate. We get a flurry of voices, except Gia's, who was gone by then. But whoever is right or wrong about what happened, only one thing is certain. The family had fractured when Gia was young. In high school, she was part of a group called the Bowie Kids, who could be something of a surrogate family instead of her real family. They were fans of David Bowie and took inspiration from him. Her friendship with them served to influence her, too. She cut her hair short and began dyeing it, adopted an androgynous wardrobe, and started experimenting with drugs, mostly cocaine and marijuana. As a model, she was discovered at a hair salon run by Maurice Tannenbaum, a stylist and amateur photographer, by Sandra Skursa, who was working there as a makeup artist. Skursa was friends with Wilhelmina Cooper, who started a modeling agency in 1967. Skursa recommended Carangi to Cooper, who signed her. Her relationship with Cooper had been described positively, with Cooper serving as something of a mother figure to Carangi. Unfortunately, Cooper would pass away just a couple of years later, precipitating Carangi's rapid decline. Carangi had her first major shoot with Versace when she was just 18. It was with photographer Chris von Wangenheim, who became a frequent collaborator with her, as well as makeup artist and model Sandy Linter, who Carangi pursued a relationship with. By the end of 1978, she was already one of the top models in New York City. People described her rise as meteoric. She was a new face and chameleonic, effortlessly working the camera. It's no wonder that she became a favorite of photographers like Francesco Scavullo and Arthur Elgort. In 1979, across a half-year period, she had graced the covers of British, French, and US Vogue, as well as Cosmopolitan magazine twice. She was stunning, and was desired by other brands. Christian Dior, Giorgio Armani, Levi's, Maybelline, and Yves Saint Laurent. She worked hard, but she played hard too. And therein lies the problem. A fixture at Studio 54 and the Mud Club, her habit from her teens plus her immense earnings, she could command 5 figures per shoot at her height, led her to using harder drugs, particularly heroin. This would mark the beginning of her end. Sometimes she wouldn't show up for shoots. Other times she would walk off of shoots. She would leave to buy drugs and dresses that cost as much as some people's cars, while others were shooting her. Sometimes they would supply her with the drugs if only to get her to behave. No one helped. Of course, drug use wasn't uncommon in her circle, but she used it to the point of physical distress. She developed track marks that photographers had to hide in order to get their shots. Sometimes, even after heavy airbrushing, they would still be visible. When Wilhelmina Cooper died in 1980, Carangi lost someone who had been like a mother figure to her. It sent her into a spiral that she never recovered from. If you haven't realized it, we've already reached the zenith of her career. This is the high watermark. It's all downhill from here. She would leave Wilhelmina for Ford Models in November 1980, but was dropped by them within a few weeks because of her drug habit. She didn't know it, but after being on the scene for 2 years, she had already peaked. The offers stopped coming in. Her friends left. She tried to get better. She checked into rehab. It didn't stick. She signed with Legends, another modeling agency, and did some work in Europe, but that didn't stick either. She tried to stage one more comeback, signing with Elite Model Management. Some people still wanted to work with her, but this would be the end. Her last cover was April 1982 with Cosmopolitan, where she's hiding her arms so you can't see the track marks. She was at the edge of her fame and fell. Her final photo shoot was with Auto Group, a German mail order company. She had 3 chances at 3 more agencies after Wilhelmina, but for whatever reason, she couldn't pull herself together to make them last. There was nowhere left for her to go. By this time, she had already been replaced by other models that eventually found the success that she couldn't, particularly Cindy Crawford, who people would call Baby Gia. Her star had fallen and the glitz and glamour had faded to black. She left New York in 1983, never to return. Her flame was at the end of the wick. The last 3 years of her life are something of a coda. She would spend time with friends and family in Philadelphia and Atlantic City, eventually reconnecting with her mother. Again, she tried rehab. Again, it didn't stick. She had a few jobs, but quit them as well. It must have come as a shock to her. Not long ago, she could command 5 figures for a shoot. Now, she'd be making that much in a year. She would turn to sex work to get money for drugs, but was found beaten on the street. In December of 1985, she was admitted to a hospital and diagnosed with an AIDS-related complex, or ARC, as a result of using a contaminated needle. Less than a year later, on November 18, 1986, she died, one of the first women to die of the disease. Her funeral was a few days later. None of her peers from the fashion industry showed up. There are few things sadder than seeing someone with potential squander it. Gia Carangi had a lot of potential. She would have been just 63 this year. She could have had a full life. Instead, she destroyed herself.